Hello Movie Mavens! Welcome back to another video on the B Movies channel. My name is Bailey and I put the B in movies. I'm gonna keep my little ramble bit that I usually do up top short. I personally love our little talks. If you're a listener of Scare You to Sleep, that's what Shelby Novak calls them, is like her little rambles. So I'm gonna keep my little rambles short up top because we have got a packed. I have like that phantom hair. Okay, I think I got it. We have a packed video for you today. We have Walten Files. We have Midwest Angelica updates. We have Vintage 8, the finale of the Married to a Sleepwalker series. We even have a new iteration of Not Your Normal Kids Show. So we have a lot to talk about. So like last week, I'm going to keep this week's deep dive short. But I do want to give my thoughts on Lisa Frankenstein because I loved this movie. I am going to see it again tomorrow, or Sunday, actually. I loved it, and so I'm going to do a little pocket-sized review, but you will be able to read my full review over on bmovies.blog as of today. So as of 10 a.m. this morning, it was locked and loaded. So let's go ahead. Let's just jump right in. I promise we will get back to my rambles. I'm sure that there will be some soapbox for me to jump on either today or, I promise, I'm Bailey, so I will be on a soapbox at some point. The only thing I do want to say is take in my long hair while you can, because I did decide I'm going to chop all my hair. I have a hair appointment in a couple weeks, so this will actually be the next to last video. The Bob and Bangs era of Bailey is coming back. I'm ready to I guess I am going to go into a little bit of a ramble. We all should have known. We should have known that I could not have not rambled. But I've been working on this Love is a Working Title project, which if you haven't read them, you can read them on my personal blog, which is nobodyputsbaileyinthecorner.wordpress.com. It's linked in my bio on my Instagram, which for those who don't know is Lisa_Frankenstein_. And, excuse me. And I've been working on my Love is a Working Title series. The first 3 are up. And then the 4th one came out this morning, actually, which Elliot, it's the 3rd story, but the 4th entry, because we had I was like, wait a second, the math is not mathing. I did some writer girl math. So there are 4 pieces up, but 3 stories, because we did an intro piece. There we go, I got it. And just writing those pieces has been so therapeutic, and so I have decided to go back to the Bob and the Bangs. If you can't tell, my little hoop fell out, so I'm now a double no stud girl. I ordered a couple new dresses off of ThredUp, because if you watch YouTube like I do, you are constantly given ThredUp ads and sponsorships. And so I don't know, we're starting a new era. It's a new year. I'm not saying new year, new me or anything like that, because I think we've all been trying to say this is our year since like 2018, and it has not been. And so I don't know, I'm just kind of feeling some change. This, like I said, Love is a Working Title has been really, I feel like I've been letting a lot go, and so we're gonna let, my hair is so long, it's down to here, so we're gonna let probably a good 8 to 10 inches of hair go, and I'm excited to show off my new hair and enter this new era with all of you Movie Mavens. So now that I did the ramble that I said I absolutely was not going to do, let's go ahead and dive into it with this week's blog roundup. And if you're new here, the B Movies channel is a continuation and extension of the B Movies blog, which just turned a year old a couple of weeks ago, and our channel is over 6 months old. And so we do some deep dives on the topics that we talk about over there. We dive more into, we expand upon some of the analog horror series that we talk about over there. And all of these pieces that I'm about to mention can be found over at bmovies.blog, which is always linked in the description box below as well. So for this week over on the Movies blog, Monday we had creepy crawly horror. And for creepy crawlies, I did kind of take some liberties, but we're talking like slugs, so like Slither and Deadly Spawn. So like slugs and leeches, we're talking arachnids, like arachnophobia, cockroaches, like the They're Watching You segment from Creepshow, which still gives me the heebie-jeebies if you read that piece. Because I hate roaches. I can do most bugs, and just roaches I can't do. And then on Tuesday, we did a spotlight on Lucille Ball. We're actually doing, this is an unofficial trilogy, where we're going to do 2 other spotlights on some golden age of Hollywood / 50s and 60s actresses, with Lucille Ball kicking us off. On Wednesday, we talked about teen dramas. If you know me, you know I love a good teen drama. The OC is one of my favorite shows of all time. I love them. And it took a lot to whittle my list down to what is in that blog piece. And then yesterday we talked about witch content. So, excuse me. We talked about witch content. So some shows, some movies. You know, sometimes you just need to sage your apartment and try to wiggle your nose and hope for the best. And so we wanted to give you that content. And then today is my review on Lisa Frankenstein, which I'm going to dive into here in just a second after we do the Bite Size Sunday teaser. It's going to be really consolidated and really compact compared to the piece. So you can read my full review over, like I said, on bmovies.blog. And since it is our deep dive, I will link it in the description box below. So for Bite Size Sunday, our review, and just a reminder, Bite Size Sunday reviews live exclusively over on Instagram. They're just miniature reviews of content I want to talk about, but I don't think I necessarily have enough to say for a piece. And they range on everything from music videos to documentaries to docuseries, shows, movies, just whatever I want to talk about. And so I give a little teaser here on Friday, and then we post the review. I usually post around 8 or 9 CST on Sunday morning over on the B Movies Instagram, which is just B Movies channel, same as our YouTube. So that's where you can find those. And so our teaser for this week is toxic masculinity, ruining everything since 45,000 BCE. So yeah, I'm excited to talk about this one with y'all, because I have a lot to say about this one. So, just to recap, this week over on the B Movies blog, you have creepy crawly horror, a Lucille Ball spotlight, teen dramas, witch content, and my review for Lisa Frankenstein, which is mostly spoiler-free. I will say, since it's time for the deep dive anyway, we give you warning, but I want to give them kudos because the trailer does not do that movie justice at all. And the trailer's very good, but it doesn't spoil. There's a lot more to the story than just girl raises creature from the dead. There's a lot more to it. And yeah. And so just a heads up, there will be mild spoilers. This is revealed in the first 5 or 10 minutes, so I feel like it's fair game. But if you want to skip ahead to after the deep dive, just listen for when I start the Walten Files. And so just skip over this part. But if you don't follow me on Instagram, I freaking loved this movie. I loved this movie. I rarely go to see things in the theater twice. I did a lot growing up because A, I grew up in small town Texas, there was nothing to do, and B, ticket prices were $2 in the day, $4 for the nighttime show, so but I'm gonna go see it again. I loved this movie. I think it's a wonderful, and this is where the spoilers come in, so I'll give you a second to click off. I think it's a wonderful examination of grief. And like I said, there's so much more to it than the trailer. There's so much more to it, and I hate to be, and I say this in the piece, I hate to once again be your friendly neighborhood resident dead mom girl, but this is a dead mom movie, and I loved it. And are this and All of Us Strangers, which are both movies about dead parents, two of my favorite movies of this year so far. Yes, they are. Are we going to unpack that? No, we're not. We're not. So I saw Lisa Frankenstein at the Draft House, which is my stomping grounds. If you know me, I go all the time. I'm very fortunate to be able to go a lot. And Diablo Cody, they had like her, Alamo does this thing where they'll ask directors or writers what their 5 inspirations were for the film for some of these bigger releases. Like they did it with Emerald Fennell for Saltburn, and they did it, I remember they did it with the director of Evil Dead Rise. They don't always do it, but for a lot of them they do. And I believe they did it for Bottoms too, but I digress. And Diablo Cody said that the 5 big movies, or 5 of the big movies, that influenced her for Lisa Frankenstein were Rocky Horror Picture Show, Weird Science, Edward Scissorhands, Cabinet of Dr. Caligari, and Bride of Frankenstein. And I think you can definitely see all 5 of those in there. She mentions that there are nods to Rocky Horror throughout. There are. And it just, this movie's wonderful. That's all I want to spoil. I do have to throw out the dead mom thing as A, a disclaimer, and B, just to kind of give context. But go see this movie if you can, or please watch it when it's streaming, or, have a movie party and rent it, and, all of your friends chip in. I've done that before with my friends where we've split a movie, all chipped in for like a VOD we wanted to watch or something. But definitely see this movie if you can. I think it's wonderful. I think I was talking with someone the other day, and I think it has all the makings of a cult classic. And to me, just Diablo Cody's done it again. And she did confirm that this movie belongs in the same universe as Jennifer's Body. And I think that's extremely apparent. She's wonderful at what she does, and she's just so good at writing, in my opinion, complex female characters. I think she's really good at breaking down the dynamics of female relationships and familial relationships. Excuse me. My throat is so dry, and I swallowed my mouthwash wrong earlier. Let me rephrase that. I swallowed my mouthwash accidentally, which was also wrong. Please don't just drink mouthwash. Sorry for the miscommunique. But yeah, that's my Lisa Frankenstein review. Go see it. 5 out of 5 stars. I think it's funny. I think it's heartfelt. There are some lines in there that just like, I was like, I just wanted to like stand up and clap because they're so accurate about grief. There's a scene in particular, I won't give too much away, but Lisa talks about how when her mom dies, she felt like everyone was just happy to move on, or just like everyone moved on. And they punish her for not, whether it's intentionally or unintentionally. And it's so good. And like, I'm very lucky to have all the support I do in my life. And like, please know people don't feel that way, or at least none of my friends or my sister have articulated that to me, but it's so real because it's just like life goes on, and it's how do you carry on with like this massive loss when it seems like when life just continues around you. So 5 out of 5 stars. I loved it. It is PG-13. There are, for if any younger peeps are watching, teenage peeps, there's some crude jokes. There's obviously gore, but it is PG-13. It's definitely, I would say, a little bit of a raunchier PG-13, but there's no nudity, there's no there's nothing like that in there. It's mostly just gore. There's a particular scene where he cuts off a body part, but you don't see it. It's just alluded to. It's just a slow motion thing, and you see, I think it's maybe 0.5 seconds. You just kind of see something hitting the trash can. You don't actually see it because it's PG-13. But yeah, so just a heads up. There's a joke about some things that vibrate, and that is shown on screen. But other than that, I think it's pretty tame. So definitely check it out. So now that we've done our deep dive, we've done our blog roundup, we've done everything that we need to take care of, let's get into special features. If you're new, special features, this is the section reserved for analog horror updates, horror ARG updates, and just discussion topics that I may not write about on the blog, or I haven't figured out what my angle is for it. And so we just kind of chat through all of these things and put all of our updates here. And y'all, we have so many updates. That's what I said up top. I talked for too long because I had coffee 3 seconds before I started recording. And to let you know how tired I am, it was the second cup of coffee I made today because I sincerely turned on my Keurig, went to the bathroom, and then came out to find coffee cascading down the side of my kitchen counter because I had not put a mug underneath the spout. So that's where we are. So let's get into it. So let's kick it off with the Walten Files for CyberFun. Before you watch this, I would highly recommend, because this is what I did, and I'm so glad I did, watch all of the Walten File episodes first, all of the previous release videos. And then I watched Nexpo's analysis video that breaks everything down, and watching those two super helped. There are things that would have probably had to rewatch it anyway. So I would highly recommend doing those two things. So, to start off, just as a primer, CyberFun Tech is the company who headed the storage facility. They make several appearances throughout the series, and they have so far. And it would have taken me a second if I had not watched the videos before and Nexpo's analysis. I digress. So we start out with footage of balloons falling from the ceiling as festive music begins to play, and we see several shots of a school hallway, and we realize this is Molly and Ed's school party that Felix had taken them to. And Molly and Ed start walking towards the camera down the hallway, and we even see Rocket in Molly's backpack. And we're shown this shot because it will come back later so that we understand the significance of the backpack. So Molly and Ed go to get Felix from what's labeled as the adult zone, it's like a bar area. And as they approach him, there's a white light that emanates and fades out. And then we see we briefly see a field, which will come back into play later. And then we're taken to some BSI footage, which is Bunny Smiles Incorporated, which I will refer to it herein as BSI, and the CyberFun Tech footage, and we get the title card for the Walten Files 4. So we're given, it almost looks like a DVD menu. And so the first thing we select is the Bond's Burgers promo option. So we see a diary entry on the screen who's from Charles Brooke. And up until this point, we have heard Charles's name, but we don't really have any connection to how he is tethered to Felix and or Jack and or BSI. And so we find out by this diary entry, and I would recommend pausing to read it. It does come across pretty quick. Between this and Greylock, I've been so stealthy with the remote because I am not good at pausing at the right time. I'm not good at pausing things, period. I'm one of those people who will mean to pause things and then get up and go do something, and then I have to rewind it. It's super annoying. But if you pause it, you find out, so Charles Brooke was the computer supervisor at Bond's Burgers. And he, according to this diary entry note, whatever you want to call it, he's known Jack and Felix for a really long time. He says they're practically family. And so we finally understand how Charles is connected. So then we're reintroduced to all of the showstoppers, aka Bond, Billy the Clown, Shaw, Boozoo, and Banny. And so each of them kind of get a little solo moment where they're in a field, or Banny's in front of a sun. But then when it gets to Shaw's solo, it's worth noting that there's a glitch. And there's a smaller cartoon version of her. It's the 3-dimensional, because we'll get to Martin's animation style, but it's so freaking cool. He's so talented. It's so rad. But there's a smaller version of her in the same style as this video that flashes in front of like the back room door, and it's very similar to, if you remember the employee training video where Shaw walks us through the rooms and walks us through some BSI stuff where Rosemary asks, "Where am I, Sophie?" It's very similar to that. And that is an immediate connection that I made. So I think this is, again, to remind us that Shaw as Rosemary, whatever happened to Rosemary happened at Bond's Burgers in that back area. So in Bond's portion of the video, it's worth noting the video glitches again. And we see a forest that has a red rectangle, obviously censoring something. And then we get a brief glimpse of a face. And it's not, I wouldn't say mutilated. Like, it's not very graphic. But it's clearly scarred. And it's, I don't know how exactly to describe it, but it's not graphic. But it's clear that there was some sort of trauma to this face that we see. And at first I thought it was Jack's, but we'll get into who this is momentarily. So then we cut to a video once the showstoppers finish doing their things, and we see one of the first models, and we're told that we're going to be shown how the showstoppers work and how they're animated and how they're made to interact. And I mean, we know now how they're animated currently, wink wink nudge nudge, but we learn like how they operate pre being stuffed with body parts. So during this segment, we learned that Rosemary Walten was in charge of the BSI art department. So we knew that she was married to Jack, but we didn't know exactly how she came into the fold. So she designed all of the characters. And something really interesting here is when they're introducing us to Rosemary, it's this character called CyberTelly that's very cute and fun. It's almost like a little computer TV clown jester. It's worth noting that if you have subtitles turned on, it says Rosemary Walten, wife of or to Jack Walten, but CyberTelly does not say Jack's name. And it's as though CyberTelly / BSI / CyberFun Tech are trying to erase Jack Walten from history, much like the other tapes. Like the picture of Felix where Jack has been cut out and it's been changed from Founders to Founder. We have the Jack's still here on the files. We have the disappearance of Jack Walten tape by the TV in a couple episodes. So this is just, again, this theme is reoccurring. CyberTelly does not say Jack's name. It's in the subtitles. It's not said in the audio. So then we hear briefly from Rosemary about how the art was made, and it's very much just like a BTS video. And then the image of her headshot that was shown when we were introduced to Rosemary is blurred. And then we skip to the animatronics portion of the video. And in this section, we also find out more about Susan Woodings, who, as we know, is stuffed into Banny. And so Susan Woodings, it turns out, worked for CyberFun Tech, and BSI reached out to them for help with the animatronics. And Susan Woodings was the lead engineer for BSI, and that's how she's involved. And when she's talking, she talks about how initially they were just going to consult, but everyone at CyberFun Tech was so interested about the animatronics and how they worked and operated that they basically had a partnership with BSI, and so Susan Woodings is the lead engineer at BSI. And then we learn that she and Charles regularly work together with the animatronics to get them to interact with the customers, to make sure that they were operational. So the two of them worked together frequently. And as we're going through and Susan's voiceover is talking about the animatronics, there are two big things here. One, as the camera is showing like all of like the faces, Charles's name is written in Sharpie over Buzu's, which is the animatronic he possesses. Secondly, there's a note to Felix Kranken from someone at CyberFun Tech who is inquiring about all of the employees that have gone missing and is asking Felix for more info. I will link the Reddit post below because it is it's like reversed and flipped. And so it's difficult to read because it's flipped 9 ways to Sunday. But I will link the Reddit post below because someone did reverse it back. And thank you to the Redditor who did that work for me. But yeah, we learned that CyberFun Tech actually reached out to Felix about Susan going missing and to say that there had actually been several complaints about people going missing and things not being on the up and up. And they are asking they're just asking Felix some hard-hitting questions, and they want answers. So then we learned from Susan that all of the animatronics have a console that help them to store memory and interact, and I'm sure that this is going to come back to bite us later. I'm sure this is going to come into play later, because to me, this was alluding to the fact that how I took it is that this console is one of the things that's like keeping them alive and is storing their memories, is how I interpreted it. May have interpreted it completely wrong. It may just be like a little technical section, but I think that's going to come back later. I think that's part of how they're able to stay alive within these robots. So Susan and Charles are training the animatronics to move around obstacles like tables and chairs because, it's a burger place. And so, the children are going to be seated, and they're just kind of, Charles gets a good chuckle because one of the animatronics accidentally slams into a table. And to me, it's all the more heartbreaking because it's just really humanizing these characters that have suffered this terrible fate. And how this section is presented is extremely similar to the mini games that we've seen before, like the one where it's like the rabbit is starving and all of those little mini games, or how Shaw moves through the different rooms in the employee training video. To me, this is very reminiscent of those. And Charles and Susan are each represented by little, basically emojis of their faces, and the animatronics are the same. And then we move into the facial interaction section, and we find out that Susan and Charles, because they gossip. I love how Martin did this. I love how you did this, Martin, where it's like workplace gossip intertwined with with this footage, so that it establishes like this workplace gossip. And for me, it was just so relatable. It was just chatting with one of your coworkers that you're close to about something that happened. And so in one of these little gossip sessions, we find out that Susan and Charles are both aware of Felix's alcoholism. And allegedly, Felix has been on a bender and he's been missing for days. And so that's how this section starts out. Again, I think that was a very clever way to weave in story and exposition without it just being so blunt. So shout out, Martin. I think that that's great. So then we learn that Jack's children have been helping with the facial recognition tests. And we also found out something devastating, which is, if you remember from the Bunny Forms episode, how they're trying to get to Lily's birthday. Lily is Charles's daughter. And that just, like, my heart just dropped saying that out loud, just like it did when I realized. I was like, where have I heard that name before? And then it clicked with me because I just watched everything again. So that's why one of the games in Bunny Form is Lily's birthday, because Charles is Lily's dad, and that's so sad. And they specifically mentioned, too, that Sophie was in the facial recognition test. And I think this is why Billy rattles those names off, if you remember, right before Ashley is unalived. And he's like going through the names, and then on Sophie's it's like, wah! It's that like really loud, like almost taboo buzzer noise. I think that this may be because of this. I think that maybe it has to do with the facial recognition software. But I digress. So then, in the next part of the video, because this is all footage, it's just over the course of several days, Charles and Susan allude to Felix having lied about what actually happened to Molly and Ed. And they say that Felix said some story. Neither one of them believe it. They talk about the funeral, and it's just very clear that they don't believe anything Felix has said. And we haven't, at least, I may have missed it, but I don't think I did. I don't think we've ever found out what Felix actually told Jack and Rosemary. But he lied for several days, and Charles and Susan, it's very obvious, they're like, no. Like, we don't believe anything. We believe that he knows exactly what happened. We believe he was exactly involved in what happened, because they do know he was driving and that he was drunk. But, yeah. And so that's how this video, again, I think this is a genius way to give exposition and to unravel more of the story by just having it as a very natural dialogue between colleagues. So, Susan and Charles start doing their tests with the animatronics, and we learn that Felix has also stashed the rocket doll at Bond's and told Charles and Susan not to say anything, and they're both not very pleased about that either, being thrown at them. So, Susan makes a comment that they also need to check up on the games, which I believe is important to note given the Bunny Farms episode. I think they were also working with the arcade games. And they leave the room. And so Rocket then walks up to Boozoo, which sets off his facial recognition software, and it says no faces found, but 3 distorted faces pop up on the screen. And I know definitely Molly and Ed. The third one, I'm not sure, TBH, who that is supposed to represent, if that's supposed to represent Bond, or if it was like supposed to be a nod to Sophie. That's the only part that confused me in this entire 34-minute episode. That's the only thing I'm not clear on. So if y'all know, put it in the comments below, but that was the one thing I couldn't figure out. So then we see that same distorted, kind of smushed face that we saw in the Showstopper segment briefly. And it's really, you kind of have to turn up your brightness too to really see it. So a little emoji of that, like an emoticon of that face, enters the screen and merges with Bond's animatronic. And then we cut to Susan Woodings as she appears to be alone at Bond's, calibrating Bond one night. And she hears some noises, she's shining her flashlight around, and I super appreciated this. There are a lot of Easter eggs. If you look on the wall, like the founder photo of Felix, there's a separate photo of Rosemary and Jack that looks really similar to that picture of Bond and Shaw that we've seen before. There's like the picture of Charles that we see for everything. And Bond attacks and paralyzes Susan. And before she is fully paralyzed, we see her writhing on the ground in pain. And it's not pleasant at all. It's really devastating. And then Bond begins to drag the body away as we cut to Jack driving to Felix's house to try to get some answers. And so Jack is like ringing the doorbell. He's banging on the windows. He's banging on the doors and just screaming and cursing at Felix to let him in. And he's just met, all that we hear, it's the sound of Jack's voicemails. And so we know that we know that Felix lied based on Susan and Charles's conversation. But, you know, Jack is just like, if you did anything to those effing kids, you know, like, I'm going to unalive you. And so it's clear that he has not told them the truth. And he just becomes increasingly defeated, and he's just begging and pleading with Felix, and is just met with no reaction at all. So then we see Felix sitting across from a blood-streaked Rocket as we flash back and see him in the car with blood-soaked windows to reference how he unalived both Molly and Ed because he was drunk driving. And so then we see him digging their graves. And we see Felix as he takes Molly's backpack. And we know it's Molly's backpack because we saw at the very beginning when she was walking down the hallway, there was a shot. And it has a little Snoopy and stuff on it. And so he throws Molly's backpack off the edge of this cliff. And then he sits Rocket down, and then he walks to the edge of the cliff as though he is going to unalive himself, and he considers unaliving himself for a very long time. And then he just falls to his knees. And then we cut to Felix at his house, and he is telling us via voiceover, I don't know if he's recording himself or what, but he talks about how he finally came clean to Jack and Rosemary about what happened to Molly and Ed, and needless to say, it did not go well. And he is clearly not doing well. And he also admits that Rosemary doesn't know he still has the Rocket doll. And he says that everywhere he goes, there it is. And we also get one of the creepiest shots, in my opinion, of the entire episode, where the Rocket doll is in front of this window, and as the TV flashes, because you know when it's really dark and your TV will flash depending on what's going on, it highlights Molly and Ed and their bloodied faces. Like, it's not super gruesome. Like, it's just like there's like some blood splatter on their faces in the window behind the Rocket doll that are just highlighted, and then at one point it flashes and they're gone. And then we learn they start calling to him from behind a door, and we learn that they have been haunting him via Rocket, and we get the confirmation that they are the souls inside Rocket. We then learn that Molly and Ed saw what Bond did to Susan that night. And we learn that all of these people, we only see Susan there, but it's alluded to because Ed and Molly are there, and through their talking, we can figure out their dialogue. We figure out that this is where everyone goes. But we go back to that field that we briefly saw earlier. That's just stark white in the field, and you can see the Bond's Burgers, like the standing sign outside, in the background. And Molly tells Ed that they need to help Susan, and Ed is very hesitant, but he finally agrees to help, and the two set out to find Susan in this limbo, afterlife, ethereal plane. And this is where we get a big reveal. Jack and Felix aren't responsible for what's been going on. I know that it's been alluded to that Felix was. At one point, I know that I personally thought, and I'm sure everybody else did too, Molly and Ed may have been involved. No. It's someone who introduces themselves as Bond. And so what happens is Susan appears in the field looking a little worse for wear, to put it nicely. She's very, her form, it's very gray, it's withered, it's, I would be so bold as to say, decayed. And she meets Bond, who, face reveal, he is the face that we saw in Bond Solo in the Showstoppers portion. He is the face we saw merge with Bond. And he tells Susan that this is Wonderland, is how he refers to this place. And he says, "Isn't it beautiful?" Which is we've heard a variation of that a million times throughout the series, like, and now she's beautiful, she will beautiful. So this is a big hint that, like, Bond is the person who is behind this. And I'm doing this because in the credits, if you watch them, Bond's voiced actor it's Bond in quotation marks. So we don't know if that's his real name or not, but that is how he is introduced to us. Bond tells Susan that she's safe here, and he says that he can fix her and hands her a gift box. And when she opens it, it's a purple bunny mask to represent Banny. And Bond tells her, like, this is the new you, and that Banny will become her new body. And Susan is really apprehensive, and Bond basically tells her, like, I mean, it's fine. It's either this or unsubscribing from life. Like, he says something about how the soul lives longer than the body. And it's basically like, okay, cool, you don't have to do this, but it's either suffering and then nothingness, or you can do this. And we get confirmation that Bon is in the Bon animatronic, because as he's going to touch Susan, his arm is Bon's arm, and we see him and his bloody hands like we saw him earlier on when he attacked Susan. And it's clear that, at least to me, that Susan took the offer, as we cut to Banny, who has a tear in her eye, and then it's like a Michael Myers from the original Halloween 78 POV, like through those mask eye holes. And so we learned that Susan, it seems, has taken the deal. And Molly and Ed, they finally see them, but they arrive too late. They're both gone. And Ed tells Molly that they'll just have to wait, and then Ed and Molly walk into the white light at the end of the field, which this ending reminds me, and Martin, if you ever see this is a compliment because I love, if you've ever watched Everyman Hybrid, it reminds me so much of that, because the song We'll Meet Again even plays. And so I think if this is unintentional, you are alluding to a wonderful series and it's great minds, but if you are alluding to Everyman Hybrid, like if it is an homage, Martin, I got it and I love it. And so that is how this episode ends. So here's what we know. Molly and Ed don't condone what's happening, and they're trying to save them. They're trying to save, Charles, Susan, etc. Basically save their souls. Bon is responsible for what's happening, not Felix, not Jack, not Molly and Ed. Someone named Bon, who is this new character that we've been introduced to. CyberFun partnered with BSI to make these animatronics. That's how CyberFun Tech comes in. That's how basically Susan comes in, Charles comes in. That's how they're all connected. And the animation for the Walten Files, it's just so cool. It's so unique. It reminds me of like Angela Anaconda or stuff you'd see on Oh Yeah Cartoons or Kablam or Liquid Television. Like, it's so unique. And this is what I love about analog horror, is there are just so many unique and innovative animations and ways to bring stories to life. And all of these creators are talented as hell. And to be honest, I wish that movie theaters, especially specialty theaters, would do like theatrical screenings of some of these series, or have them as a pre-show before something else. I really do. And Martin, I'm so scared. I'm so sorry. I'm probably gonna butcher your last name, but Martin Paredes. I think it's Paredes. I'm so sorry, Martin. I just want to give you full credit. Just thank you so much for this series. I love the Bond reveal. I love that it turns out that it's this entirely different man or entity who seems to have some really nefarious activities planned for these people. I cannot wait for episode 5. Martin has revealed that the name of episode 5 is Faces of Grief. I'm so pumped. I already love this series so much. I have a poster of it in my office. And this installment just exceeded any expectations I had. I mean, just my expectations were already very high, and they're through the flippin' roof. Like, it's so well done. And just, Martin, thank you so much for sharing this story with the world. You are so immensely talented. And I can't wait to see what else happens with the series, because we know 5 and 6 are coming. And I think that's going to end season 1 of the Walten Files, but take your time. And yeah, I can't wait to see what happens next. You are so, so talented, my friend. And at your animation, you were already very talented, but holy cow, this just took it to the next level. So thank you so much for this. And I'll be waiting like everybody else. So that is the Walten Files. So next up we have Midwest Angelica Easter. So we know these are kind of interstitial videos while the crew is hard at work. Again, you all take your time. We will all be waiting. Good art takes time. There's no rush. So we get a title card from home that says this footage, that says that this is like footage from some sort of contamination lab where a research group is being housed. And then we learn that this is Starkill research and that they're attempting to find out how the entities communicate with each other, aka like how that hive mind works, right? Because AZ001 and all of the people that have been assimilated seem to be able to communicate and kind of know what's going on simultaneously. So we get a voiceover from Dr. Stanley Vega, who explains how Starkill has been assimilating everyone. And apparently AZ001 has, like, it possesses these things called Podolsky neurons, and they're like nerve endings. And so this is how all of the assimilated find things out, because they're contaminated with these like with these neurons that are like nerve endings. And then we get some redacted information because it's analog horror. And we then get to the, it's Akashic interactions tests, ? This one's really testing the limits of my phonetics today. So, for these tests, the first participant is none other than Dr. Stanley Vega, who was just explaining everything to us. And the TLDR is they're inserting these neurons into people's spines to see how they interact. No. And so we get a creepy close-up of a face, and I can't tell if this is a real person or if it's Blender or another animation program. Either way, it's very cool and very creepy and very well done. But it's like this green, it's like this black, like a night vision-y type situation. And so we find out through some text cards that Dr. Vega doesn't seem to know exactly what's being done to him. It seems as though he's being told that he's being screened for infection. So my understanding is he did not consent to this, which that's so gross anyway. And I hate that. So we go back to Dr. Vega, aka the creepy face, as he begins to breathe heavily and rhythmically. And then as we get the participant information screen again, it's for someone named John Carlisle. And where it says the status, like the patient status, instead of, like the time and things like that, it says something along the lines of like, I wake up every morning and pray, and it's cut off, and yikes, big yikes. And so then we find out that Dr. Vega has like all of this intimate knowledge about John Carlisle, and it's as though, it's like they're connected. So it's proving that these neurons do work as a hive mind and are nerve endings from AZ001. And so we go back to Dr. Vega's face, and he's making a bunch of like grimaces and just weird faces and noises, and seems to like writhe around in pain. But again, we only see his face, so like, good job, whether this was animation or real life. Either way, you do an excellent job of articulating those feelings, Midwest Angelica. And I think he might say something here. I couldn't make it out, nor did my subtitles catch it. But then we go back to another text screen, and it says, or we go back to the patient info screen rather, and every single thing where it's like name, age, everything, it just says the word Easter. And we find out that it says that because apparently that is the only word that he now says. Yikes. And then we get like a little promo for the tool that they're testing, which is this neuron tester, and that's where the video ends. And I did go check because I was like, that name John Carlisle sounds familiar. And friends, John Carlisle is one of the names listed at the end of Bulletin, which means he was in that church group. So this is an interstitial video of probably previous to those detectives that were unalived at the end of the finale. So John Carlisle is, if you watch Bulletin, he is one of the names at the end. So that's the connection there, and that's the whole thing, is they're all connected, and they're all assimilated. Basically, everyone on that church group list, we can make the assumption that they're assimilated. So, instead of another banger from Shane Top from iCarly, it's another banger by Midwest Angelica. I loved it. It's so good. And again, I can't wait to see what else happens in Act 2. So next up, we have Vintage 8, Married to a Sleepwalker Video 9, which is the finale of this series. So Video 9 basically kicks off exactly where Video 8 ended, where Shelley is yelling at Daniel from the kitchen. So we see Shelley is tied up to a kitchen chair. Excuse me, that was so gross. I'm so sorry. And she yells at Daniel to untie her. Daniel comes into the kitchen demanding the truth, and he threatens Shelley. Shelley basically taunts him, says that he's the one that's sick, that they should have been recording him this whole time instead of her. And so then Daniel gets up and goes to the silverware drawer and gets I don't know if I can say this word, but sharp object to, how do I say this? To her. And as it turns out, she doesn't bleed. There are worms instead of blood. Like we saw the night that when Shelley was abducted, and that's what she did, the same thing happens. So Shelley says, "You've really screwed up now," and we go to the title card. And so we get some exterior shots of the house, and then we cut back to the inside as Daniel asks yet again what is going on. Shelley tells him to put her friends somewhere safe, and this confirms any lingering suspicions that Daniel had about this being the same Shelley pre-abduction. And so he stomps the worms into oblivion as Shelley screams and then throws her head back to do those cute little guttural noises that she's been doing throughout the series. We then cut outside and we see a giant UFO in the sky, which emits the same light we saw the night Shelley was taken. Daniel looks outside, and now there are like a cavalcade of people in their yard in that same praise pose, head back, making the same guttural noises that Shelley used to make when we would find her and see her in the footage. And Daniel asks who all these people are, and Shelley warns him not to go outside as they'll unalive him as soon as he walks out the door. And Daniel basically asks, like, why are you telling me this? Like, it's clear, like, you're not Shelley. Why do you care? And they say Shelley loves him and that she wants to protect him. Shelley then says that the worms aren't of this world, that basically they don't want to sound like, I'm going to say they because it's a life form. And so they say that basically they don't want to sound like a sci-fi movie, but they're what Daniel would call aliens. And Daniel says that all he wants is his wife back, but the worms tell her that they have integrated with Shelley and that killing Shelley would basically kill all of them. And so then there's a knock at the door, and Dr. Lopez and the detective just casually stroll on in. And, oh no, I lost my notes. Okay, whoo, there we go. I have to have notes to keep me on track. And I was like, the video's over if I can't find my place. So, Daniel holds the rear to Shelley's throat, and the detective draws his pew-pew, and Dr. Lopez says that they would like to unalive Daniel, just casually. And Daniel says that all he wants is Shelley back. That's it. And Dr. Lopez reiterates what Shelley said about that not being possible. And so Daniel says to take him instead, and Dr. Lopez says that they tried. And here's where the big reveal is, that they actually did try to integrate with Daniel. That's when he had LV. That's what LV is, which we all called that it was obviously this. And that's why they started with mosquitoes. But it turns out some people, Daniel included, are immune. And so he was immune to the worms, and he just got better, and they couldn't integrate with him. So then Dr. Lopez compares what they do, because they're basically like, is it a parasitic relationship, mutualistic relationship, busting out those 6th grade science words that I never thought I would use again. And Dr. Lopez basically says to think of this as cohabitation, which, ew. Daniel challenges Dr. Lopez, who admits further that they can only integrate with humans. And that's why they're infecting the human race, because they can't, and it doesn't work with any other life form. So then Dr. Lopez, the detective, and the whole group of cute little wormy alien friends outside tell him to let Shelley go. And Daniel says, I'm taking my wife and we're leaving, and like, that's that. But then the detective jumps up and starts beating the ever-loving daylights out of him. Daniel finally, the detective, and it unalives him. And as Dr. Lopez and Shelley start their little alien worship service again, throwing their head back, doing their little praise pose, Dr. Lopez says the worms are safe, but only the detective is unsubscribed from life, which I guess, yay. I mean, I don't, it's not good for us, but I guess it's good for them because the worms are still good. So Dr. Lopez says that Daniel was only acting in self-defense, and then the group of people outside vanishes. And then Shelley begins to kind of wax poetically a little bit and tells him that they could have lived happily, and essentially says if it wasn't for those meddling kids, aka Mary Q and Daniel. And Daniel says that he's going to tell everybody what happened, and Dr. Lopez says that the infected will see whatever essentially the hive mind wants them to see, and that those who are immune will just think Daniel's lost it. So Dr. Lopez and Shelley then leave, and Daniel watches through the kitchen blinds as the ship leaves, and they vanish. So then Daniel's landlord arrives at the door, and this is where we get the second big reveal. And remember how I said his landlord gave the detective like a weird or knowing glance when the detective first showed up after Shelley's abduction? Well, friends, his landlord is actually Mary Q. And it wasn't his wife they took, it was his sister, because it turns out he's immune like Daniel. So he just continues to comfort Daniel, and the two leave together as sirens start blaring in the background. And so then we end the video with another interview with Dr. Barr from the CDC, as the interview asks him if LV is alien in nature. And Dr. Barr just is like creepily answering, and he says that like we can trust them, and that if you don't believe that like he and the government, everybody have your best interest at mind, that you will soon, aka they are going to infect everyone as soon as possible. And it's like Dr. Lopez said, if you're of this hive mind, you'll see whatever they want you to see, and if you aren't, then it's, you know, it's a 50-50 shot really if they'll believe Daniel. And so Vintage 8, man oh man, this was such a good series. I can tell they get a lot of fun with this one. I can't wait to see what comes next. I can't wait to see how this will all play into the bigger Vintage 8 universe that you've established. And I just want to say thank you so much for all of your support for the B Movies channel. I really appreciate you. Again, you know that we love you over here, and just thank you for giving us that same support. Very much respect. So that is it for Married to a Sleepwalker. All the episodes are up. I will obviously link episode 9. I always link the episode that we're covering in the video, and I will link to Vintage 8's channel below, as well as Midwest Angelica's and the Walten Files, and the channel for our last piece of special features, which is Not Your Normal Kids Show. So, and I would also like all of you to know this is going to be the longest episode of B Movies we've done so far. I don't know about y'all, I love long form content, so I really hope that this video inspires you and makes you happy like long form content does for me. But let's get to Not Your Normal Kids Show episode 16. So we start with Dottie facing what appears to be the Earth. It's like a celestial view. And she says it's beautiful. And the other entity that is either in Dottie, or I'm not sure, so take a step back. I'm not sure if when Dottie switches voices and things, I'm not 100% sure yet, and I think that the reveals are coming. If it is a Dottie, something within Dottie, Or B, if it's just, we've not met this character yet, and so it's just Dottie, it's almost like a play, where it's, the different spotlights on the different characters to represent different things. It reminds me a lot of, if you remember in Bo Burnham's, oh my god, what? I just forgot the name of a Bo Burnham. I have to be tired if I momentarily forgot the name of a Bo Burnham special. So in What, the Left Brain, Right Brain song, that's the vibe this is giving. So I don't necessarily know if this entity is within Dottie or if it's a drama and like theater strategy. So just to kind of set the scene, it's going to be left side, right side. And that's how we know which character is speaking to us in this opening. So we see Dottie from the left. We see the left side of her face. And she says it's beautiful. And then we see the other entity, which is her right side, say, and they have a different voice, we're not there yet, Dottie. And when Dottie questions them, they say, she's like, why not? Like, why are we not here? And they say, so you have something to look forward to. And then the husky voice says, we're in this together, right, Dottie? And Dottie just continues to smile and look onward and doesn't answer. And then it goes from like a celestial view to what I think is almost like a halo glow of a TV. And it's just the back of Dottie standing on what appears to be water. And then we get a glitch, and then we get the normal title card. And so Dottie greets us as she stands in front of a board with a cryptic message. Spoiler, these are runes. So each one represents a different letter. And so I turned to the YouTube comments to see what they spell out, because they do appear throughout this whole video. And I was like, this is one of those brief, fleeting moments where I'm like, I don't know the runes. I was like, I am just going to turn to YouTube. Like I did to Reddit with that one thing for the Walten Files. I was like, I'm going to turn to the YouTube comments. And so it turns out that these runes throughout the video spell out Tragedy of Faust. And so we'll come back to that. So if this is a Faustian deal, I think it's we're getting closer and closer to Dottie having to pay up. So then Dottie asks us what our biggest dream is, and her eyes go black. And she asks if our biggest dream is to be her friend forever. And then we pan out as the whole background goes black, and we see Dottie standing in the middle of several faceless women that are identical. And she says that she wants to have more friends to play with. So then Dottie shows us a painting. We're back in the same house we're usually in. And Dottie shows us a painting that she recently bought that depicts her in a crown smiling. And I had the Billie Eilish song stuck in my head forever. Thank you. And then the phone rings. And Dottie steps off camera as this black wave of goo starts trickling down the painting. And then Dottie tells us to come along, like, what are we doing? And she goes to do her outro when we ask about the phone call. And she says that it was Tall Man delivering someone, and then the screen glitches, and she corrects herself to something. So she's delivering something instead of someone. And then Dottie says goodbye. And we see a room that appears to be filled with worms and goo. And it looks almost like, to me, if you remember in Slither, when, I can't remember what the girl's name is. The girl, y'all know, the girl from the bathtub scene that has, like, the nails, where she, like, claws into it, and she's the only one to, like, actually try to get infected, but she survives. And, like, what she sees in her mind of, like, what those worms do and how they assimilate everybody, that's what this reminds me of, is, like, something she would have seen in that brief moment in Slither. And it's, like, full of worms and goo, is what it looks like to me. Again, I could be totally wrong. That's just my interpretation. And there's a shadowy figure that appears in the doorway. before glitching out. It's getting weird, y'all, but like in the best kind of way. Like, this is my kind of weird. I'm like, let's pull out the weird Faustian deal. You know, let's pull out. I'm so excited. Like, BB Key, I can't wait to see where this is going, because I am so fascinated by the whole Faustian deal thing. If you remember, like in Hell House LLC 3, that's, you know, like that's what the whole basis of that movie is. I'm so excited. And like I said, I think Dottie may have made a deal that it's now time to collect on, or the person that she was in it together with, she completely threw them out. I'm really excited to see where this is going, because I think this is going to be a lot deeper than analog horror. I think this is going to be like borderline cinematic, and I'm very excited. And BB Key, like I've said about all of our creators, you, Vintage 8, Martin, Midwest Angelica, y'all are all so immensely talented, and we haven't said in a while, but the future of horror is YouTube. 10,000% mark my words. Y'all are so immensely talented, and just thank you for bringing all of these stories to life and continuing to bring these stories to life. As a lifelong horror fan, YouTube is producing some of the best horror content, and in horror cinema, there are all of these directors who are first-time directors or indie directors that are really getting their due and are really getting their budget and attention, and I'm so excited. I'm so excited. So just thank you again, Midwest Angelica, BB Key, Vintage 8, and Martin for all that you do. So it's time to go to subtitles. I will try to make it quick, because this is the longest video we've ever had. I hope y'all enjoy it. I hope y'all do. So for subtitles, we'll get through this and we'll wrap up, I promise. So for subtitles, a teaser trailer and a secondary trailer have been released for Late Night with the Devil. It looks so good. It's up on my list with long legs. Super excited for this one. It's out next month. Which, speaking of long legs, the first major trailer has been released. It's one of my most anticipated releases of the year. This and Late Night with the Devil both are way up there. A Romy and Michelle sequel is on the way. It's one of my favorite movies of all time. It's something that I share with one of my friends. It's one of our big friendship movies, and I can't wait. We're getting a Cinderella-based horror movie called Cinderella's Revenge that will be out in April, and I believe the teaser trailer is out for that. It's announced we're getting a season 2 of the Goosebumps series. Let's go. It ended on a cliffhanger. I was so scared it would not be renewed, because a lot of things are not getting renewed, which, speaking of which, the show Evil on Paramount Plus, they just announced they were supposed to have seasons 4 and 5. They nixed season 5 and are just shooting an additional 4 episodes, so, like, things are really getting cut right now. So yeah, I'm really excited that it did get picked up for a second season. The Conjuring 4 has been announced. It will be the last installment for the franchise, allegedly, for now. And director Michael Chavez is at the helm. And then lastly, Molly Shannon is joining Only Murders in the Building as a reoccurring character for season 4. And right before I sat down to record, it was also announced that Meryl Streep will be back for season 4. So, those are our subtitles for today. And so I think it is time to wrap this bad boy up. I hope that you enjoyed this longer video. Again, there are so many new releases. That last week's episode was beefy. This week's episode was beefy. As of the time of recording, we don't have any new installments. But again, that is always subject to change between now and the next time I sit down to record. So next week we'll probably do a bigger deep dive. But we'll just see what happens in our sweet little world of analog horror. So to wrap things up, be sure to follow me on Instagram at Lisa_Frankenstein_. Be sure to follow Elliot, reading.with.red. Be sure to follow us on Instagram, just at bmovies channel. Same as our YouTube. Be sure to subscribe to the blog. It's just bmovies.blog. Those blogs come out at 10 a.m. CST every Monday through Friday. And be sure to check out Bite Size Sundays, which are posted 8 or 9 a.m. CST on our Instagram, which again, just at bmovies channel, just like our YouTube. And yeah, be sure to subscribe if you're not subscribed. It is free. we would love to have you. Be sure to like this video, throw us a like if you feel inclined, and comment below what other analog horror series are you excited about. Are there any analog horror series or horror energies that are starting up right now that I don't know about? Next week, I do want to talk about BV Key's other series, Detective You, so I will probably touch on that next week. But other than that, I think that is going to do us. Again, I hope you've enjoyed a longer video today. We just have a lot to talk about. And I think on that note, all that's left to do is fade to black.